it's pretty much impossible to do it all, to run like the operations of a business and all the other things, and then also effectively run your own marketing and PR strategy.
Hi, I'm Josh Owen. As the owner of a video marketing company in New Orleans, I've been on the quest to learn everything I can about marketing. Everyone has a different style, different strategy, and a different experience. Is there a wrong way to do it? A right way to do it? Let's find out together as we make marketing make sense. Welcome back, everybody, to another amazing episode of Make Marketing Make Sense. I'm here with the fabulous Maggie Robert, and today we're going to be talking about what should be in your PR playbook. I'm always curious about PR, but thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dive into PR, learn a little thing or two. You know, I think a lot of one of the things that I think is interesting with PR is, you know, before I even dive right into it, the word PR, like what to you is PR?
So, I mean, PR, public relations.
Yeah.
It's obviously a little bit of an abstract thing, just like marketing, you know, right? Like, I think what a lot of people associate with PR is really the media industry. So, like, I think the main thing people think of with public relations is like earned media, getting in the media, you know, in an organic way versus paying for advertising. That's what we are kind of taught that it is when you're learning about public relations. So yeah, and I think the thing that separates it a little bit from like traditional advertising is that when you are getting in the news and in the media rather than, you know, paid advertising, you're getting in like a credible source that already has built up that authenticity and that your audience already knows and trusts, rather than a traditional ad, which typically comes directly from a brand and it's pretty obvious to the consumer. So that's kind of the difference between PR and advertising. And yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, yeah, it's always interesting to hear like that breakdown, because I think a lot of times we toss these words around and you're kind of like, what exactly is this? You know, and all the time I'm trying to find it. But I guess, you know, going into that, you know, mentioning a lot about PR and, you know, what's currently like a lot when people first start, like what are some of the things that they miss when they're getting into PR?
So I think one thing that a lot of people miss with their PR strategy is taking a more proactive approach. So a lot of people only do public relations and think about public relations when they have a big piece of news to share, like they're rebranding or expanding or, you know, have really something really exciting that they want to share. But really, public relations is all about getting people talking about you. And it's important to stay top of mind all the time and continue to be a part of the conversation. And one way that you can do that is by being really proactive about your PR strategy. And so what I mean by that is, instead of only sharing when you have something big to announce, you can always be looking for opportunities and even creating news angles yourself when you don't necessarily have something to share. So one way that you can do that is by constantly, you know, monitoring the media. You know, you should be consuming the same media that your target audience is consuming, so that you understand what's going on there, what's important to your audience, and then you can chime in and take advantage of opportunities as they arise. So like a good example of that is, like, say you're a healthcare organization and there's some sort of health crisis going on in your community. Like, the chances are that the media is probably going to be looking for some sort of expert to speak to that. So why not, you know, reach out to them directly and say, hey, look, we have somebody on our staff here that can speak about what's going on in the community. And so that's what I mean by being proactive, just being a little bit ahead of the game and kind of throwing yourself in the ring when things come up, when opportunities arise, is a great way to do that. And just like another example, like say you're like a hot sauce brand.
Ooh, I love hot sauce brands.
Yeah, right.
Well, which hot sauce brand are we? Crystals?
Yeah, we could be Crystal.
Okay, all right, I like that.
Yeah.
You know,
Is that your favorite?
Yeah.
You gotta be a loyalist. Well, it depends
Is it my favorite?
on the food,
I mean,
right?
well, you just asked you open up a whole can of
Yeah,
worms there.
I
You know, it's
know.
like, I mean, listen, if I had to go back to my favorite hot sauce brand is probably Sriracha, but that's just because, you know.
But it depends on what you're eating,
yeah,
too.
true. Like, that's what I'm saying. I just wanted to stay local, you know.
Yeah, with my
you know,
Louisiana dishes like
you
a
know,
gumbo,
yeah.
I love Crystal.
Okay,
Sriracha's
exactly.
good
See,
on
you know,
different types of
yeah,
stuff.
it's
Okay.
exactly.
I
You know,
feel
it depends on what we're eating here.
Yeah.
Now we're talking, but like, you know, if I want a vinegar-based hot sauce,
Yeah.
we can work with Crystal.
Crystal's
you know?
a good one. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's say we're Crystal.
Okay.
And, you know, all of a sudden there's a lot of hype about hot sauce, which there kind of has tended to be in the past few years, right? We could sit here and have a whole conversation about it.
Let me tell you, I'm already perked up. I'm ready to go. You know?
So, and people are talking about hot sauce a lot, but they're not talking about you. You know, how can you insert yourself into that conversation? You should see who's leading those conversations, whether it's a journalist or an influencer, and then, you know, be proactive. Send them a bottle of your hot sauce and let them know what sets you apart from other brands.
Yeah.
One thing that you can do is even give the media story ideas. You know, they really appreciate that, especially if it's a good idea. You can be like, hey, everyone's talking about hot sauce right now. Have you thought about doing a story about hot sauce pairings? Like what hot sauce pairs well with what food, or what hot sauce pairs well with which wine?
Yeah.
Or just doing like a hot sauce roundup.
Right.
And so a lot of times if you help with those ideas, you know, people are busy and they might say, you know what, that is a good idea. I'll take you up on it.
Wow.
So those are some ways to be proactive about public relations. And coming back to your original question, I think that that's something that a lot of people really miss, is sort of like continuing the strategy beyond just focusing on when they have a big announcement or a big piece of news to share.
That's interesting. I like that. So you're almost like suggesting that you kind of you're building your own, creating your own opportunities. But I think one of the things that's interesting is especially companies, what do you suggest they do to start, you know, building this idea out? Because obviously, you know, I would love to just like, I like what you're saying. And it's like, oh yeah, I got to just go out there. But I think it's going to, like, I imagine it'll be harder to just like start creating stories out of nowhere. Is there like a thing you do to kind of strategize to build, you know, to start, you know, practicing that, you know, because obviously like one thing that people are probably going to wonder is like, where do I look to find, you know, these stories? Do you just like go to your, like, I like what you were saying, you go to your target audience, but you know, what does that mean? Where, like, you know, how do you, you know, where do you push to find those kind of stories?
So, I mean, I think it comes down to thinking about, you know, I mean, what are your goals, first of all? Like, what's most important to you to get out there about your brand? Like, what story are you trying to tell? And then based on that, who you want to think about who your target audience is. And then really understand where that target audience is consuming media. So I think that, you know,
well, before you even get there, because it brought it up. I think my question wasn't as clear as I wanted it to be, so I'm going to give you even a clearer version of that.
Let's do it.
So, you know, is it traditional media? Is that the only people you should go to? Should you go to like influencers? Like who should these businesses like should go to, you know, these days?
So I'm going to sound repetitive, but it depends on your target audience. So let me give you a few examples. So let's say your target audience are millennials who are super interested in the food scene. So again, you want to think about what media they're consuming. And it probably isn't just traditional media. So, and you can do that by, you know, a little intuition, but also doing some research on your audience. And so, back to millennials who are interested in the local food scene. So where do we want to be? They're probably looking at, you know, that audience is largely on Instagram and TikTok. So we should be partnering with Instagram food influencers as well as TikTok food influencers. And then also looking at some other media sources, like let's say an Eater is a great one that a lot of people in that audience are going to be looking to when it comes to the local food scene. So we should be looking at, you know, online media outlets like that, as well as even something that is a little broader, like probably NOLA.com. And then So let's say we have more of like maybe a business story that we
Right.
want to share with a little bit of an older audience. Then maybe you want to look to some local business news outlets. Like there's, and I'm talking in a very local
Biznola.
perspective, but you can always like apply this
Yeah.
to any market that you're in. So yeah, Biz New Orleans is a good one. City Business New
Yeah.
Orleans. And then, also looking at the Times-Picayune, Advocate, NOLA.com, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
now.
Yeah.
And so, you can get specific based on who your audience is, and you should. But that's not to say that, like if you're in a market like New Orleans, which is a relatively small media market, and media markets have become smaller and more condensed over the past few years, there's always going to be some crossover, no matter who your target audience is. So whether it's a business story or a food story, you're still going to be targeting
Right.
a publication like the Times-Picayune New Orleans Advocate, because that one speaks to a broader audience. But you
Right.
also want to look more in some of those niches and combine those in your target.
Yeah, and that's my next question, which I think it's going to take two parts, because what I'm curious about is, which I like how you detailed, it seems like there's now a lot of different platforms that you can reach out to. But one of the questions that I have for that is, how should you reach out to them? Like, what should you provide them? Is there, like, the word press kit is still thrown around? Do you need something like that? I mean, obviously, like with dealing with influencers, which is a lot different than reaching out to news publications. So, when you're talking about strategy that you would build out for a client, first talking about the traditional news route, like what would you present them?
Yeah,
And then we can talk about influencers after.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, the world is has so much noise, and there's so much competition, so much going on. The days of just sort of like sending out a press release to a big media list and hoping for the best are really over. It's never really been a good strategy, but it's really not now when there's so much going on
Shots
and
fired
so
to
much
the
being
guard
talked
there.
about. Yeah. And so it's really important to be super customized when you're reaching out to the media. And so that means, not only looking specifically at each journalist that you're going to be reaching out to and understanding their style, understanding what they've been talking about, is important so that you can provide them, with a story that is going to seem interesting to them, but also sort of just connect with them on a human level, say, hey, I saw your piece on this, and I think you might be interested in what my client has to say as well, or what my brand has going on. And so I think being super customized is important. It's tempting not to be, but the results are going to be so much better if you just take the time and, maybe choose fewer people to reach out to, but create more high quality outreach. You're going to see such better results.
Gotcha.
And so what else was I going to say?
Well, I like that already, because I guess it's always a question of quality over quantity. And so what you're suggesting is, really hone in and craft a really quality idea, sit some time. Like, I guess the other thing I think about is one of the hardest things to do is brainstorm creative. Is that kind of the reasoning why you would bring someone like yourself on board to your business? Or, what do you suggest for that kind of coming up? Because, like, this is a lot of, like, coming up with ideas and stuff like that. Like, what's the best way to get that, done for a business?
It is. It's a lot of getting creative. And, I might be a little biased here, but I do think it's helpful to bring in an outside expert a lot of times to do that, for a couple reasons. Because, not only are they an expert in their field and they probably have a lot of relationships already with the media in the community that you're trying to reach, but also it can be hard when you're really close to your own brand. It's a beautiful thing, but a lot of times when people are really close to their business and, are in the ins and outs of it every day, they tend to think that everything is important and everything is newsworthy. They're like, well, we just did X, Y, and Z, and so we need to send out a press release about it. And it's like, you kind of need to stop and think through, well, does your target audience and really care about this, and is the media really going to think this is newsworthy? So I think it's helpful to have an expert or an outside person come in and do that for you. Of course, there's benefits to being really close to the brand as well. You really understand it and know the intricacies of your story and of your brand. But if you're working with a good PR person, chances are they're going to take the time to really get to know you and be able to tell your story in a more compelling way than you might be able to, in a more objective way.
Right.
So.
No, I love that because I think too, like you're saying, like also creativity comes from also maybe bringing in you who might be more attuned to these target audiences. Like you might, a lot of times I feel like people are kind of not really paying attention to what people are, or especially their target audience are watching or listening to, or, so someone that is closer to the ground, that's their job to do that. It's kind of like put that burden on someone else and let them focus on it rather than yourself as a business owner. You can focus on the other things you want to focus on.
Yeah. The fact is, it's just like I've seen people do it, but it's pretty much impossible to do it all, to run like the operations of a business and all the other things, and then also effectively run your own marketing and PR strategy. I'm sure it can be done, but I have not seen it many times.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, so just to pivot so we can get this in, but I'd love to hear, for business owners, because now this is the hot new thing. So when business owners are dealing with influencers, what would be your strategy to dealing with them for PR?
So it's definitely, you're going to want to take a little bit of a different approach than when you're working with traditional media. A lot of times because influencers are creating and putting out a lot of content, but it's not necessarily their full-time job. A lot of times the best way to go about it is to offer them an experience or something that they can review, and it's not just about having like that trade of services. It's also about giving them a way to really showcase the experience and what you're offering, because most of the platforms, well, pretty much all the platforms that you're going to be working with influencers on are so visual. And so by giving them an experience that you have to offer, they can show other people like what that experience looks like. And that's really unique, and something that's so special about working with influencers is because, they can do that in a way that traditional media outlets really may not be able to. And so, what I mean by that is, say, a lot of one way that people do this, especially in the city, say that you're a restaurant, you can bring in a local food expert influencer and give them a really wonderful experience and work with them to showcase that.
Right.
It really depends on what your business is and what your goals are and what you're trying to do. I think also that, it's standard to pay influencers for their work if you're not able to give them an experience. And so that outreach is going to look a little bit different. You're going to ask them, say, hey, like, here's what I'm trying to do. Does this align with your brand? And then, you'll go into a relationship that might look a little bit more contractual, where you're paying them for their service, because it is hard work.
Right.
They're like, creating content is not easy. Anyone who's done it knows that.
Yeah. Exactly.
And, it's a really hard balance. And, not to say that it's that new, but it's new enough that people are still really figuring out that balance and kind of like what they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And I think it's for their audiences too. Like, the influencers need to remain authentic to their audiences and, talk about things that, are relevant to their audience. So you need to keep that in mind as well when you're reaching out to influencers. Sort of the same as media, you want to understand their brand, the things that they talk about, and kind of understand whether or not you're going to be a good fit to work together before reaching out.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's kind of like almost a similar story from what I hear you're saying to what the same deal with traditional media is. You need to come to both of these entities with ideas for them, because the more control you have over the story, the narrative, the better the end product will be.
Yeah.
So that's great. Well, I think that's a good sum up, if I've ever heard one. So, well, fantastic. Well, I think this is a great place for us to kind of, wrap things up and tell people first, where can they find Maggie Robert in the internet, on the digital sphere, all that good stuff?
Awesome. So right now you can find me at maggierobert.com. I'm actually undergoing a rebrand right now. There'll be a lot more places to find me very soon. And I hope that I can share that with you and your audience. But right now that's a good place to find me and kind of go from there.
Nice.
So
coming in hot, rebrand coming soon. Be on the lookout.
yeah.
Maggie Robert, that's right. Bing, bang, boom.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, awesome. Well, any other plugs you want to make before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. I think I'm all good.
What's your favorite king cake right now?
It's got to be the dong fong.
Dong fong.
I can't get enough.
Dong fong. Honestly, yeah.
The
I've had
brioche, the
Wow.
cream cheese icing.
Yeah.
Oh my God, so good.
That's so real. That's
Yeah.
good. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all. And thank you, Maggie, for joining me on this
Thank you
wonderful
so much.
adventure
This
through
was
PR.
so fun.
Yeah, it was great. And love to have you come back. And in the meantime, we're going to head out. So
All right.
thank you guys. We'll talk soon. See y'all
Great.
later.
Thank
This has been
you.
another great episode of Make Marketing Make Sense. And I'm just going to keep exiting. It's just happening. And we're going. Goodbye. This has been Make Marketing Make Sense, brought to you by Comfystone. If you need video content for social media, your website, or email marketing, hit up Comfystone at comfystone.com and follow Comfystone on Instagram and TikTok. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.